A friendly reminder here to please keep your phones off and stay seated during the duration of tonight's speaker. And let's welcome Noreen.
There's lots of seats in the front row, people. Come on up here. I'm Noreen, and I'm an alcoholic. And I am really grateful to be here. And I know that, sometimes that's kind of a canned response. I'm so grateful to be an alcoholic, But I don't know whether it's because I had coffee and I'm feeling a little amped up right now. But seeing everybody get the chips, that's pretty emotional. I remember I was one of those people who didn't want to get a 24-hour chip because I didn't, want to be a newcomer. So I kind of stayed, and then I jumped up and got my 30-day. So anyway, my sobriety date is August 23rd, 1986. And I cannot believe that I've been sober this long. I think I'm sober longer than most of the people here are alive. There's a lot of young people here, which is wonderful. And, part of the reason that I mentioned my sobriety date, because, if I don't screw up, I'll celebrate a birthday in August. But one thing I do remember very vividly was February 86 and May of 86 and June of 86. So what I remember is that, I was an alcoholic from the first moment that I took a drink. But I'll tell you something, February till I hit my bottom, what I call it is my alcoholic tsunami. And if you know what a tsunami is, it just kind of pulls back, and then all of a sudden it just crashes down on you. And my drinking my last 6 months was out of control. Before I start into my story, I always like to read something out of the big book, because it's kind of like getting in my canoe. I need to get, put my oar in the water. Reading something out of the big book always grounds me. So my new favorite page, thank you, Chris, for letting me borrow your big book, your little itty-bitty big book. So actually, and this is very important because it's about the family afterward. And it says, so this is page 132. So we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over seemingly tragic experience out of the past. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and have been given the power to help others. Everybody knows that though in bad health and those who seldom play do not laugh much. So let each family play together or separately as much as their circumstances warrant. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. We cannot subscribe to the belief that life is a vale of tears, though it once was that for many of us. But it is clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. Avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery, but if trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. And it's like, I want to start off by, and I shared this with Mike a couple days ago. Alcoholism is real, and it is a disease. And I'm really touched to see so many young people in this meeting, because my beautiful daughter, my gorgeous daughter, Hannah, little Hannah Banana, just got her third DUI, and she crashed into a car. We think it was like 11 in the morning. And, she told me last week, Mom, if you hadn't shoved effing AA down my throat, I might get sober. And it's like, so that's when that big book comes alive. It's like when it says no human power can relieve our alcoholism. And I think there's some page that says Noreen Lawler cannot get her daughter sober. Because, both my kids, I had my kids in sobriety. Like I said, I'm almost 35 years sober. My kids are in their 20s. And I'll never forget the other thing about my son. My son's 28, and the first time that he, was drunk and And he was sobering up. And I know this is not an Al-Anon meeting. I'll get to AA here in a minute. But one of the things he said to me, and I said, Danny, why do you like to drink so much? And he says, Mom, it takes the fear away. And I thought, oh, man, do I know that? Do I understand that? But I'll tell you guys, I know when you guys look up at me, you see, yesterday was my birthday, by the way. Thank you. I was 63 years old. I want to thank the manufacturers of Botox and hair dye. Yes. I said, if I have any more stuff done to me, I'll almost be fiction, So anyway, but the thing is that, what, I relate to the young lady with the turquoise hair and the guy with the pink hair, because that's what I was. I mean, in the 80s, I was a punk, I was at Wendy O. Williams and the Plasmatics, and I had the Sex Pistols. I don't look like that. So I am your future, you guys, so you might be like, I'm sorry. I am sorry. Leave now, man. It's like, I am your future. So it's like, it's like, oh my God. Because I'll tell you, and I jump around a little bit. I mean, I'll tell you, I do jump around. And I remember my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It was when I was in detox. And this woman, so this was in 86, so this woman back then, we don't do that so much anymore. She had frosted hair. Do you remember frosted hair? Your grandmas had frosted hair. And so there she was Scottsdale, so she had the coral lipstick, she had the coral nail polish, not blue like mine, and she had a Talbot's dress on, and she was reading the big book to us little savages. So she was reading the big book. And I had such contempt for her. I said, there is no way that woman is an alcoholic. I bet she's a Christian. I knew it. I knew she was going to throw like Jesus on me, and that was the last thing I wanted. But that's why that one line in the big book that I love so much, which is contempt prior to investigation. Contempt prior to investigation. I had her all figured out, and she was not an alcoholic, and she was a do-gooder. And she was going to go talk to her friends about how she talked to these poor little alcoholics, and she feels better about it. That's kind of how I really, and that's how I felt about AA for a long time. Just a little background. My parents are from Ireland, so we got that alcoholism, gene right there. So, but they never drank. My parents did not drink, and But what I learned a lot from being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is that, first of all, alcoholism is a disease and it's generational and it doesn't care who it picks, And after I got sober and really got my parents to talk about, because they made me feel like I was the only alcoholic out of my 62 first cousins and my 19 aunts and uncles. I mean, they made me feel like I was the only one. Come to find out, we're like everywhere. We're like cockroaches, And so, but what I found out was their parents were alcoholics. So one of my first introductions to alcohol was we would have house parties. So in Phoenix there was a small Irish community, and we didn't mix. We never had Protestants at our house. We never had non-Catholics. It's crazy. And so, but all these old guys would come over and they'd start drinking and singing songs, and then they'd get drunk, and then they want to talk about killing the Queen and, the IRA, and I loved it. I thought it was great, but what they did is that they drank Falstaff beer and little shot glasses. And so what we would do is, my sisters and I, we would pour the little glasses of bourbon and we'd give them and they'd say, oh, thank you, Nora. Thank you, Noreen. And they'd knock it back, and then the music, then the partying came. It was great, man. The music is on. Well, the first time that I ever tasted, I was intrigued. So this guy had left a little bit of that bourbon in his shot glass. So I go to the sink and I take my little, knock it back and put my little tongue in the shot glass, and there was just enough bourbon that went down my throat. And I can still remember that. I must have been like 7 to have that lovely burn go down my throat. So what is it like a little junior alcoholic do? You know, I turn into like a mini heat-seeking missile the rest of my life. I mean it. And where I found my alcohol was Robitussin, Vicks 44, which was my favorite, and NyQuil. Well, NyQuil, you got the shot glasses, so that was good. I do remember one time pushing, because I was little, pushing the chair to the stove, to stand up on the stove, to get the cough medicine, and I was in my brownie uniform. I mean, it's like, you know, there I am, you know, I must have had a hard day at the office, and but I think a lot of us, you know, when we're little and we talk about we don't feel like we belong or we have that fear, I don't know anybody in this room who's identified as an alcoholic who doesn't think they needed a drink in first grade, right? How many of us needed a drink in first grade? I did, yeah. And, you know, from the time that I started drinking, it never really ceased. My little pilot light was ignited. I was ignited. But also, the other thing that happened long before my little shot glass NyQuil Robitussin treatment was that paralyzing fear. I never could understand why I was always afraid. And I remember looking out the window when I was a little girl, waking up, you know, the boogeyman and all that stuff. But I was always waiting for something bad to happen. There was always something. And the other thing is that I was such a little liar, you know. So when the big book talks about, you know, that we are incapable of being honest, which demands rigorous honesty. You know, my friend Garrett, today we were talking earlier, and I said, what do we talk about? He said, just be honest. And I thought, you know, that was such a hard thing for me to do, was to be honest. You know, I would make the stupidest stuff up. Just because I didn't like my living situation, I didn't like who I was, I told stories so you guys would like me. So of course, so that's the conning, you know. So when it talks about our motives, I was a little con in third grade. I remember telling the girls on the playground at St. Teresa's parochial school that I'd met the Pope. It's like, who cares? You know, but I wanted to be something. So it's like, you know, so I tell, you know, these kids, you know, these stories, because I couldn't stand who I was. And then, but what I found is that when I finally got it on with drinking, you know, like it says in Bill's story, I had arrived. So my first drunk was actually in County Mayo, Ireland. You know, I have all my father's relatives are still in Ireland. They still are. And so is my mother's, but so we would go to Ireland all the time. So I had my cousin Marion and my cousin Sean, and we stole a bunch of beer. That's the other thing I do, is I like to steal. So I'm a lying and a stealer. So, you know, so anyway, so I stole some beer, and we went to this kind of ruined old castle. You know, there's a lot of them everywhere, and you know, the field was full of cow dung, and I'm falling in it, and you know, it's just a mess. You know, but when I got drunk, I had arrived. I also got my first hickey that night, so that's kind of a special night for me. Sorry, you know how you just remember those things. You just remember, you know. You know, it's like, you know, multitasker. So anyway, but it's the typical thing. You know, I stole beer, I lied to my parents, I threw up all over the place, but I couldn't wait to do it again. And you know, from the time that I was 14 to the time I was 28 years old, I never really had any desire to do anything else but to drink. You know, I had a lot of false promises to my family. You know, I got in a lot of trouble. I got suspended from high school for drinking, and that was the other thing, you know, the other thing about being an alcoholic, and I need to tell you this. So we would go to these big Irish parties. Now we're talking like St. Patrick's Day, you know, so there's hundreds of us. And there would be these guys, and they'd get up on the stage, and they'd be singing, and then they'd start crying, and then they'd fight for the microphone, and I loved it. But my mother And the other women, I call them the cats. They would sit in the corner and they would talk about the alcoholics. And they would say, look at the shame of it. The shame, And then they get him out of here, Patrick, get him out, And so I'm watching my mom, and I'm watching the alcoholic, I'm watching my mom. And what I've decided was an alcoholic was a man, and he was an embarrassment to the family. We don't want him around. And we also ignore his wife and his children. And that's what my mother and these ladies did with these other couples where the husband was too much of a drunk. They weren't invited. We ostracized them. So when all of a sudden this word comes around that maybe I'm an alcoholic, I'm like, I can't be one because they're shameful. And I'll tell you, I never, ever, once in my 14 years of drinking, did I ever think I had a problem. Not once. And the only time that I was exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm really going to show my age, before TV would go off, there would be public service announcements. And there would be public service announcements with Jason Robards, if you guys know who he is. And he's an actor, and he said, I am proof that you don't have to die for a drink. And he used to do public service announcements for Alcoholics Anonymous. And so the other thing is that there's sometimes you'd see TV shows where they'd have like drug addicts in a circle, and they'd be all, heroin addicts, and they're all mournful and, drag. So the other thing I also equated, so this is that contempt prior to investigation. I had everything figured out about recovery. I had everything figured out about AA, and I was not an alcoholic because my last year of drinking, things really did get out of control. I was falling down. I was getting in fights. I remember I did one geographical. I moved to Greer, Arizona. I decided I was going to be a horse girl. I was going to be like Audra Barkley and learn how to ride horses. And my first night in Greer, my very first night, has anybody ever been to Greer? Okay. Well, I worked at Molly Butler's, and I ended up getting mixed up with all the guys from Greer Lodge. And my first night in Greer, I slept with the owner of Greer Lodge because he had tons of cocaine and a lot of booze. And I remember the walk of shame from Greer Lodge to Molly Butler's, still in my 1980s outfit, since it was 84. And I remember saying, how did that happen again? Like, oh my God, this is Apache County. It's not Maricopa County. I really thought that I would behave in a different county. So there I was, and I got run out of town in Greer. I got run out of town. I did. Because I like to open the register and take money out of it. Like, that's bad. So and that was my other thing of being the big shot. I'd like not ring up charge for alcohol and, drinks are on me. Well, actually, drinks are on the owner, but I wanted to be the big shot. That's what I did, and another story about Greer, about how I didn't care what I did to you or you for my drink. So there was a VFW, for those of you that don't know, that's Veterans of Foreign War. That is a club for veterans, and they drink really inexpensively. Well, in Eager, Arizona, if you went to the VFW, your drinks were like 75 cents, but if you had a veteran with you, they're only 25. So I would like go pick up veterans, and like, Korean or Vietnam? Korean. Come on, old guy. So this one guy's name was Glenn, and Glenn had a steel plate in his head, and he was not allowed to drink because he would have horrible seizures. Well, I was able to get a hold of Glenn when his wife wasn't watching, and I took his Chrysler Newport, and we drove to Eager, Arizona, and I drank, like, I got loaded on $3, and I drove him back. He was drunk, I was drunk, we were all happy. But then when we got to Molly Butler's, they have that big window, and all the women were standing there waiting for me. And I really thought they were going to kill me. And when the wife said, "You could have killed my husband," my response to her was, "Then you should have done a better job keeping an eye on him." I mean, that's what I did. That's what I did. Good little Irish Catholic girl, I didn't care. I didn't even put it together. And, as we get sober, I call them my sober shudders, like you might be sitting at a stoplight and you think about something that happens to you and you go, oh, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Like, oh my God, because, we start remembering things that we had done to people, and I got fired from that job, and of course I did. I got fired from a lot of jobs because I take money from them. So anyway, my last weekend drinking, I was on a tear. I started on a Friday night and started drinking. And what happened to me that Friday night, and I couldn't drink Saturday, but then I started drinking Sunday, is that I kept drinking and drinking and drinking, and I couldn't get drunk. I was like as sober as I was possibly be. So then, we're really good chemists, so maybe the bourbon's not working, so I got to do some more vodka and more cocaine, and then drink really ice cold beer, but not the Corona, so it's like, we're chemists. What are we gonna do to get us where we need to go? And my last night was, I can only say it was perverse, because I could not get drunk. It was awful. But then what happened is I got that physical craving where like my body all of a sudden needed it. And now it's like 2 a.m. in Tempe in August. And of course I have that alcoholic car, that when I gun it, all the bottles roll back, and when I slam on the brakes, all the bottles go forward, and when I turn left, the horn goes off, and I got a bungee cord holding, but I'm thinking I don't have a problem. I'm cool. I've got my stuff together. But at 8 in the morning, I'm now still knocking on people's door asking them for alcohol. And I went to this guy's house named Mike, and he looked at me and he's like, "Oh my God." And I said, "Do you have any beer?" He's like, "I'm going to work." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "Just go pass out in my room." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So he leaves, I go into his room, but I sit on my bed, and all of a sudden I look out the window, just like that window, and I just said, "God, I cannot do this anymore." And my compulsion to drink left me at that moment. And I've never drank since then, ever. And also the desire to drink left me. It was crazy. It was almost like God said, "Oh, I'm done with her." Punch my clock, like, "Get her out of here." But the other thing that happened is that I was able to pick up the phone and call someone, and I said, "I think I need help." And I said it really fast, and then I hung up the phone. I thought, well, now you've done it, because the next thing you know, I'm in a detox with Little Miss Coral Nails, and it's like, I cannot be an alcoholic. So I decided I wasn't going to be an alcoholic. I'm going to be an addict. So, because I pictured alcoholics were the bums in Phoenix on Van Buren, but being an addict, I would be like Janis Joplin or, some other edgy, I could be edgy being, so I'm like, I'm an addict. Have you ever done heroin? No. Do you do pills? No. No. But I'm whatever. I just didn't like the label. It was all about that stupid label. I didn't want to have a label on me because that meant I was, and I never could understand the concept of this being a disease. So I didn't want to go to AA because AA didn't seem very fun. So I went to another fellowship, and that fellowship was fun because we went bowling, we went tubing. We didn't really go to meetings or do steps, but I liked it. But one of the things that started happening was I would have to go to a few AA meetings, and I kept hearing, you have to have a sponsor. You got to do the steps, blah, 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 blah. So I just wanted to keep the heat off, so I had asked 2 different women to sponsor me, and both of them said no. They said no. And here I am. I'm thinking you guys are the dregs of the earth, and you're rejecting me? I was like, oh my God. So one of my responsibilities of being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is how I talk in a meeting. Like, when I'm at a meeting, I hold in utter reverence. Because when I was at a meeting, and you talked about how happy you were because you were able to be with your family, or you finally got that job, and you got a sponsor and blah, 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 blah. And I'm seeing the people that are laughing, and I'm seeing the people who look like they don't have a care in the world, and I'm paying attention to what people are saying in a meeting. So you guys, for 1 year, I didn't have a sponsor. But I thought, oh, okay, I better do 90 meetings. Oh, I'm supposed to go to a book meeting. Okay, so then I started going to book meetings. So when I was about 10 months sober, I was chairing this other fellowship. This was in Scottsdale. And so our meeting was downstairs, but upstairs was the young people AA. And they were rude. Rude, rude, rude. So my little meeting only had like 3 or 4 people, but the YPAW meeting, they had like 30, 40. So they would walk by my meeting and laugh at it. And then they said, this one guy named Jim, he goes, hey, why don't you throw some water on your meeting, maybe it'll grow. I mean, shit like that. These guys, bunch of little, I mean, and I'd be there with my pamphlets like, but here they were. I mean, they looked like feral dogs. I mean it, they were like dogs. And so one night they asked me to go out to coffee with them. So it was these 5 guys and me. And we went to Coco's on Scottsdale Road in Camelback. And so they're asking me questions. And what's really, really funny is that 4 out of the guys I am still really good friends with. These 5 guys, they were like 21 and 22. I mean, I'm getting 12-step by guys with acne. I mean, it was like terrible. They had these braces and, where's your sponsor? You know, it's like, oh my God, I don't got one. It's like, it's nuts. So they're like, you need to go to 4848. You need to get this sponsor. Well, 1 year later, I am the chairperson of, back when I was in YPAW, whatever, Arizona Conference of Young People in AA, it was called YES, Youth Enjoying Sobriety. So I was the chairperson for the YES conference. And you guys, it still to date is the most unsuccessful young people's conference ever. Ever! It was awful. It was awful. We had some great speakers. We had June G, my God, you know. But it was really, you know, we have the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and we have the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But the one thing that we all did, and back then, and that's why, for those of you who are new, you know, get in with a group that is sponsoring, that is having fun, that gets you active. I used to think, like, when they say, Noreen, you need a service position, I'd say, I'm not your bitch, you know? Like, I'm not going to clean your coffee cups. What is this, some kind of hazing? You know, I really thought I was so clueless. You know, I had that defiant, arrogant attitude, but I got beat down by the members of AA lovingly. I got beat down. But anyway, this conference, so anyway, you know, we sold t-shirts, we had great speakers, et cetera, et cetera. But that night, you know, it was some treatment kids, obviously, but they snuck into the hotel in the middle of the night and took their big lighters to the fire things, and they flooded 3 floors of the Holiday Inn. So the entire Holiday Inn got evacuated. So I want to tell you, all the intergroups in Phoenix wanted to kill us because they said, you know, you little young people AA, you know, are putting a bad eye on AA and, you know, blah, 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 blah. we weathered some, it was tough. But what we did is that we were able to pay back what we needed to pay back and pay all of our bills from that conference. And we had enough money to give Tucson $25 of seed money for next year's conference. So, when we got out of the way, and let God handle everything, it's absolutely wonderful, and it was about, I really started to believe that I was an alcoholic. Well, going back a little bit, I was 9 months sober, and I was sitting at a meeting in Scottsdale, Hogan's Heroes, and when it says we have to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're an alcoholic. So I was 9 months in this program before, even though I said I was an alcoholic or I was an alcoholic addict or whatever, I didn't ever believe it. I could have said I was a Shriner, because I didn't believe it. I just didn't want to stick out. But once I had that fully conceded, and I got a sponsor and got in the middle of it, my life changed. And if there's anybody here who doesn't want to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, it says in Dr. Bob's story, if you have a problem with the God or you suffer from some type of intellectual pride, I feel sorry for you, because I never would have imagined that the life that I have today is a result of having a disease of alcoholism. AA and alcoholism, AA is goofy. Like if you're a diabetic, they tell you don't eat sugar, you need to take insulin, and this is what you do. You have cancer, you may have to quit smoking, you get chemotherapy, and you get radiation. You're an alcoholic, you go to AA and you tell people you're sorry, and you pray to a God. And it's like, where's the treatment, The treatment was very, very lost on me, and I remember being at a meeting and looking at the steps and seeing that 9th step that said, made direct amends to such people wherever possible. And I remember leaning over to a friend of mine and I said, does that mean I have to pay back people I stole from? She's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, and I'm like, I can't do this. I'll never eat again. I will never eat again. And they're all like, do the steps in order, blah, 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 blah. I want to tell you, when I did my 5th step, and if you guys anybody done a 5th step yet, that's when I really felt like I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's when I felt like, I am part of something that is so big, and so important and saves so many lives. I came from a sponsor lineage, and I still do it. Peggy and I come from the same sponsors, where you read the big book to your sponsee, page by page. You do the steps out of the book as you're going through that, and then you go through the traditions, and then if you really get bored, then you read AA Comes of Age, because it's really important to understand those who came before us and what they did, and then Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and as Bill sees. And my sponsee and I were reading Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and I tell you, we're reading it and we're crying. We are reading this book and we're crying, because the sacrifices and seconds and inches, that's what Clancy talks about, that there's some alcoholics that make it and some that don't, and it's just seconds and inches. I think that is such an important thing to remember, So I'm such a typical alcoholic in AA. So at 5 years, I decide, well, I'm not going to do service anymore. I'm going to get a husband, and I'm going to have some alcoholic babies. I'm going to have that too. And about 7 years of sobriety, I stopped going to meetings, and I didn't even stay away that long. But I didn't have a compulsion to drink. But the worst thing that happened was, I lost my conscious contact with my higher power, and that was worse. And that feeling, having you're laughing and you're laughing and you're laughing, and I'm scowling, that was tough. And I'm not kidding you guys. I have not had a service position in Alcoholics Anonymous since I was 7 years sober. Because what I had to do, by the direction of my sponsor, was to stand up and if my ticket got called or I got tagged, I'd say, I'm Noreen, I'm an alcoholic, and I just won't let you guys. I stopped going to meetings. I feel like hell. I want to bite your head off. I hate you all. And thank you. And that's what I had to do until, again, God got into me. But like I said, I used to think a service position was a way of punishment. Well, now it's like, I set up the chairs and tables at my home group in Tempe. Only because it's like what I was given, I can never pay back. I can never, ever pay back what was given to me. And I want to talk real quickly about a couple of my amends. So I don't like looking bad. I'm still, it says we want to have an image we know we don't deserve. So I'm telling everybody I'm making amends when I'm really not. And I know now that I'm lying, so it's that self-honesty. It's not the cash register honest, I'm not being honest. So I finally called that owner of Molly Butler's Lodge, the guy that I stole from. And so I called him up on the phone and I said, Jake, this is Noreen, and he's like, Noreen Lawler? Yeah. And so I said to him, I said, I wasn't a very good employee, and when I worked from you, I gave drinks away and I took money out of the till, and I want to make it right with you. And he said, I've been waiting 5 years for this phone call. And I want to tell you that there is no drug, there is no check, there is no man, there's no now chocolate or sleep that can tell you how incredible that feeling is to be right with somebody. I mean, I want to tell you there's nothing. Because when I used to look at people in meetings that look like they're just chill and just kicking back, and I thought, they must have had a lobotomy or they're like slow. And what I now realize is that they're serene. Now I'm looking like one of those people. I'm just content. I'm in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's, I've had all the goodies, I've had everything monetary. But I'll tell you today, at 63 years of age and 34 years sober, the greatest thing for me is living an honest life and having peace of mind. That is incredible. But you know what? And life has not been all that easy. I mean, life just happens, and it doesn't say you come to AA and everything's going to be great. I want to tell you, when I was 25 years sober, well, I moved to Tucson and I started a business. And of course, I started a business right then the market crashes and everything crashes. And I didn't want to look bad. So I didn't want to let people know that at 25 years sober, I was busted. I was bankrupt. I lost my house, and I was not being honest. And then I was dying. So finally, I thought, you know what? If you have 30 days and you have 90 days, you and I work the same program. It doesn't matter what you have time. Just for me now, is that the pain is, I can't handle the pain. So I went and did a complete fifth step. I got really honest with a bunch of people and let the people close to me what I was going through. And ironically, for some of you guys who know from the Valley, that there used to be a really big meeting down in Phoenix called 2121's speaker meeting. And I, right after I did my fifth step, I somehow got tagged at the last minute to speak at 2121. And I knew that I have to be real today. So I told like a few hundred people that I was buzzed. But I would rather tell the truth and live an honest life than ever lie to a God and lie to my fellow AAs. So there's nothing today that will keep me from being honest. Now, like I mentioned before, what I'm struggling with today is I don't want my kids to go through what I've gone through. like seeing you guys here, I would love to see my daughter and son here. But I also know that I can't do anything about it. You know, I don't want to see my daughter already did 30 days in Tent City. And you talk about sick Al-Anon. When she first went to Tent City, I didn't want her to be cold, so I bought her a whole new wardrobe to go to Tent City. I mean, like, how messed up is that, you know? It's like, you know, I still want to run the show. I still want to control things, you know, but I will do anything for you as an alcoholic, or you. I mean, I would. I didn't understand people's sincerity because my motives, I was such a sneaky little bitch. I mean it. It doesn't matter. I had like tentacles. If I did something nice for you, there was an attachment to it. So for you to come to me and ask me how I'm doing and that, do you want to go to coffee? I never believed people's sincerity because I had never had a sincere bone in my body. So if you're still skeptical and you still just think we're all a bunch of little happy loonies, that's okay. Just keep coming back. I'm getting ready to run out of time. I just want to tell Michael, thank you for asking me to share. And Cameron, you are an awesome chairperson, secretary, and I love the suit. You know, we always wear a dress when we speak, and we greet our fellows because that's the reverence of what Alcoholics Anonymous gave to me. So I will always be grateful, and I hope all of you stay sober forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. Let's give another big hand for our speaker tonight.